So hello guys, welcome to this webinar. We'll be discussing a lot about blockchain, about how this pandemic actually gives a lot of opportunities today to talk about this new novel technology as well. And definitely to the viewers out there, stay home, stay safe, and welcome to this live webinar. So before we start talking about the blockchain, we talk about the pandemic and how it's create a lot of technologies and create a lot of opportunities for us. We would like to start with Mr. Long to talk about themselves. We would like to go with the round of introductions once, so that people should know like who you are and where you're coming from. So we can start, Mr. Long. Welcome, Mr. Long, and you can start with your introductions.
Hi, good evening. So happy for me to come here to share with you about what our activity in Vietnam on blockchain to support the preventing the COVID-19. So I worked for blockchain for last 5 years in Vietnam. Before that, in 20 years ago, I worked for information technology and the director of IT in the e-commerce, logistics, supply chain, and travel. But last 5 years, I worked for how to apply blockchain for the enterprise solution and including the fintech also. So nice to meet you all.
Nice to meet you. Me?
Jivan, can you start?
Okay. Thanks, Ankur. So my name is Jivan Yanam. I'm co-founder of Orion City, which is Sri Lanka's largest IT park. Then went on to found Hatch, which is Sri Lanka's largest incubator accelerator from Sri Lanka. And also in my role as SLASCOM chair, came up with Sri Lanka's first AI policy framework. My expertise is not really in blockchain, but probably helping companies kind of think about solutions, etc. as we go through the accelerator. So that's really where I want to focus on.
Sure. Hi, Damon.
Hey.
Damon, can you introduce yourself?
Sure thing. Well, first of all, thanks very much for having me. It's great to be a part of it. So yeah, my name's Damien King. I'm the founder and CEO of PUML Better Health, and we'll probably talk a little bit more about that shortly. It's a blockchain project. But just as a way of introduction, my background's engineering. I've been involved for over 20 years in application development and spent a long time in the UK working particularly with streaming technologies. And I got involved with something called Bitcoin early on in 2012. I sort of started mining, and yeah, I've been always involved with blockchain, and particularly in the last probably 12 months, I've been spending a lot of time with EOS.io and the EOS project.
Nice having you here. Mr. Rajkumar?
I'm Rajkumar. I'm the president of Fintech Association of Sri Lanka. And also I'm last 2 years involved with maybe indirectly on blockchain because one of my friends started an ICO project in Jordan, in Middle East. So that's my first involvement with the blockchain and the crypto world. And now I'm more towards how to apply the blockchain into various other areas, especially on supply chain management and various other areas. So this time, COVID, the coronavirus outbreak, and maybe this time we have a better opportunity to apply the blockchain to this particular scenario. Thank you.
Dr. Claire?
I guess the most important thing is that I'm Jivan's good friend. That's about all you need to know. So my background is in artificial intelligence, but I was also an investment banker in Wall Street in the late 80s when greed was good. My involvement in blockchain is really investment. So Damien's company is one of those I've invested in. So I can share some of the other companies that are using blockchain for some unique applications in different areas. I mean, Damien's one is more in health. There's some that are doing it in trading and and authentication of counterfeit products, which Damien was also involved, I believe. Yeah, so I was also the Asia Pacific ambassador for Singularity University, and now the global ambassador for a spin-off from Singularity University, which is OpenEXO. Yeah, I think that's about it. Thanks.
Nice. Akshay, here you go.
Thanks, Ankur. Hey, everyone. So I'm Akshay Agarwal. I am the co-founder and CEO of Blockhuman Studios, which is an organization that helps builders in the world of Web 3.0. And I also happen to run Blockchain in India, which is the largest network of blockchain practitioners in India. So over the last 4 years, we've got 8 of the top 12 projects in the crypto space to India. And their first touch points in India have been with us, from Consensus, R3, Algorand to, Stellar, some of the best folks. So yeah, we focus on getting Indian projects to go global and partner with some of these best visions in the blockchain world. Previously, I've run a couple of other startups, worked in product roles with, so developer upskilling companies, travel companies. So I've got more a product mindset on that note. And also I happen to represent Tim Draper's Draper University in India, wherein the idea is to support entrepreneurship more in the evolution of society kind of a vision. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks, Akshay. Thank you, everybody, for spending time here. And the first question what we have is at the end, like it's a basic start. When we say talk about blockchain, we talk about the transparency, we talk about trust, we talk about traceability. The one thing comes to my mind about when we talk about pandemic, it's all about, the first thing is all about traceability of the funds. So traceability of fund is something which is very much important. And how you think like traceability of funds when it comes to donations, when the country asks for donations from the globally, from everybody, whosoever can make some donations, and how you can utilize those set of donations fruitfully. So something that comes to my mind the first. Any thoughts, Dr. Clarence, on that?
Yeah, definitely. I think you're talking about more on the financial transaction side, right? Where you're providing accountability of the money that's donated and the money being passed on and so on. I think there are many solutions for that. One of the companies, I don't know whether whether they're here. I invited them, based in Finland, that I'm an investor in. Not sure what the name is now. Your Circumworld before, but basically they're trying to create the ability to transact, to bank the people that don't have accounts and so on. The guys who developed the largest prepaid card, Tap Commerce, the company based in Australia, it's the largest prepaid card company in Indonesia, and they basically now try to move it to blockchain. But I think the other area that is really important for this COVID stuff is the medical data, right? Because now you see there's so much confusion on whether the data is been authenticated or validated. I think we should be able to apply blockchain technology in the data collection and to make sure the authenticity of the data that's actually been analyzed and so on. Because right now we have a really mixed view of all the different countries reporting different rates and so on. So I think there are many possible applications for it. I mean, maybe Damien might have a view on that, I think.
Sure.
Yeah, thanks, Clarence. Yeah, definitely. I think, look, we feel very strongly about data, and I think COVID-19 has created two sort of opportunities in the space. One is about the data movement and that traceability of it for people who have been infected. And then obviously the contract tracing is something that's really relevant here in Australia. So just in the last few weeks, the government has released a traceability app that uses Bluetooth, and it tries to record every single interaction you've had with any other individual so that they can do contact tracing. And so again, I think this is a really good example of some of the difficulties that we have with transparency and governments controlling your data, both your health data and then also your physical data, the people who you're talking to, and you know, the people you've come in contact with. So I think blockchain here can create, because it is decentralized and there's not one government or one person controlling, but blockchain's a great solution here where we can actually decentralize that data. And like our customers for our application, Pummel, everyone should own their own data. You know, they should own their own medical data and even their own traceable like GPS data as well.
Yeah, I would like to add to that, Ankur. So basically, I think in India, and I would guess some of the other developing countries, one of the key things is, efficiency of the public distribution systems, right? So as you mentioned, funds, it's very important that at the country level and at the state level, particularly in the case of India, we're seeing some of these funds coming in. For example, the Prime Minister's Care Fund or the Chief Minister's Relief Fund, which, all sort of citizens are contributing to, with the idea being that these sort of funds are supposed to go to the endpoints, and they've identified everybody is contributing specifically to, let's say, things that they can relate to, or people or demographics that they can relate to, right? So the idea there is very important that all of these funds end up going directly to the right people. I guess decentralization here, in the sense of government distributed funds, is not the main idea that sort of brings in value, but more the idea that auditability becomes the key factor, right? So apart from obviously crypto and decentralization powering a lot of things, for example, data in the standpoint of just DNA data, right? There are cloud DNA platforms that are coming up. I think this is one of the key areas where you could see implementation of trials, clinical trials happening on different kind of DNAs or patterns identified, and sort of on the basis of that implementing techniques to counter infection. So that obviously is a key space, but I think just the relief funds going directly in 100% capacity to the people for the purpose it's for which it's sort of brought about, I think that's a huge problem that it can solve as well.
So Akshay, like when the time you talk about the healthcare records coming in there through the blockchain, but do you really believe that it's open for everybody? If anybody can answer me that, how good the hospitals are agreeing to give the details? Because a lot of privacy issues are coming up in terms of the healthcare records. They don't want to let know, like, okay, like how many patients came or what sort of data happened or what thing happened. A lot of companies or the hospital, organizations, they don't want to really share the data. So how are you going to tell the healthcare that this is something which is utmost important and which is required to make sure this thing should not happen? Given your thought?
Yeah, if I can just actually add to the question, because one of the things when considering, when we want to use blockchain is, can the blockchain actually handle the number of transactions per second if you're going to, do a kind of a large countrywide kind of implementation? Because one of the things we found, like Ethereum, for example, the number of transactions on a particular block per second was very, very low. Has that problem been solved? I know that you doing things like side blockchains, etc. Are those efficient? Can blockchain be used for a very large scale implementation? It would be a question I have.
Yeah, well, I can definitely answer on that. So in regards to Ethereum, I think that is one of the things that they are actively developing, trying to increase that again. But that's why our company sort of moved to EOS.io. And I think there's been a number of dApps, what we call a distributed application, that's had to move over to EOS.io because of the speed of transactions. And also the speed of being written across those blocks. So for those who don't know, EOS is a DPoS platform. So that means it's delegated proof of stake. And so that allows a smaller group of block producers, which means we can increase the number of transactions per second. So you can go anywhere from 1,000 transactions per second on EOS. And so for our platform, we've been able to see that you can actually write as quick into this decentralized system with hashed data. So the data obviously make a lot smaller, but in doing that, you are able to get a really good outcome that is actually truly decentralized.
Yeah, in Vietnam, we did the same way a little bit. That we hashing the results put on into the centralized app. We call that COVID-19 test certification. That means, of course, one of the big issues is we need to connect to the hospital, the test lab who do the test result. But firstly, we create just one simple QR code for each people. That means whenever they test, or we don't care about the result yet because it's related to the privacy. And of course, we protect their privacy based on their decentralized app with their private key. So whenever they have the result, they put on the decentralized app, then show the QR code. And the government or the other company want to check the result, they could show the QR code and then turn on with the private key, allow them to connect to their results. That's one of the way we try to utilize the blockchain support for trustable tested results in blockchain decentralized application.
Yeah, I really like that. And I think that's awesome. But just coming back to that original question is how do you get the hospitals in like a large country like India to change? I think it has to be user driven. It has to be from the user. And that's the beauty of dApps is that now you're getting them on your phone. We see that you can start to log your data. We start off with the very generic health and fitness data and then wearable data. As it becomes medical grade, you'll start to get richer and richer data that you then provide your phone to your practitioner, and he's able to use that data and then enter directly into your system. And so you become the holder of your own data. But it has to be driven by the community and the individuals because it's too hard to get the hospitals to agree, as you know.
I mean, so just to add to that, Ankur, I was very recently, exploring this whole phenomena that's coming up. We've all learned about MVPs, minimum viable products, right? Or, sort of product market fits in a way. So there's this whole, research being done on kind of the sentiment behind everything called product zeitgeist fit, right? And what that says is that anything that comes up in a huge way, in a 0 to 1 way, essentially comes from a basic sentiment, right? So today, if you see what's happening on I can speak about the on ground level in India and, would love to hear other perspectives, what's happening across the globe. But what's happening here is that government has come up with a blockchain tracing app as well, just as Damien, you were mentioning. So what the problem that's happening there is, they're accessing all kinds of data, right? And obviously at this point in time, I would say the least of our problems is thinking about how data is being used, because if we're alive, and we come out alive of this whole pandemic, I think that's a feat in itself. But there's this whole sentiment of whether one should download the Arogya Setu app in this case, right? And here, by the opposition, it's been touted as one of the biggest or most sophisticated surveillance systems that the government has ever set up. And which means that moving forward, this is something that will be used to influence anybody and everybody. So the whole sentiment of everybody not believing in centralized institutions, for example, banks faltering, just very recently last week, I think we saw one of the banks getting their license withdrawn in India. All of that points out to obviously the core ethics of Web 3.0, as in you own your data, which again very brilliantly was stated by Damien again. The idea there that this is kind of a counterpart to when somebody searches your property, they need a search warrant, right? The same counterpart that if you own your data, whenever somebody wants to access it, there has to be a permission given from you. Once you give this permission, and if all of this is tied in to, let's say, at multiple levels, one, let's say, for example, in the colony you live, which is very important for them to understand who's facing what, right? Secondly, at the government level, to understand what is the consequence of it and how hospitals can treat it, right? If you tie in all of these different institutions into this that are involved in this mega environment, and you sort of form incentives around how this data is being used. If you contribute an X amount of data on top of it, and if it contributes to, let's say, saving a life in XYZ format, can you in a very efficient way map it into something that is a core number or a core tangible factor that says that this is the incentive that you get against it, right? This is the core ethos of crypto in essence, and it's a collaboration technique. So if something has to be solved from a technology perspective, I think crypto stands to gain or contribute the most here. Give the right incentives to different parties, and of course, token economics is a huge kind of a play area. But an efficient implementation of it can solve the problem to sort of at a huge scale.
Sure. I think I was about to come to the crypto the next, because we do know, I think crypto is just not only probably just not only in India, probably countries like Africa, countries in Africa, actually they can actually solve a lot of problems where actually government is not efficient enough, or the government is not what do you call it? I would say not ready enough to beat with the pandemic, but where the United Nations and WHO comes to an action and they work on that part. So probably I can. So I think one of the good suggestions I would like to understand on the government perspectives, probably because Vietnam has done really well when it comes to stopping the pandemic, and as well as even the Australia and New Zealand. Probably Dr. Clarence can give some insights what Australian government is actually doing it to minimize either using a blockchain technology or how a blockchain technology can actually help with respect to the government, so that they keep the privacy at the par, as well as to ensure that everybody is happy in terms of the solution.
So, do you want me to go first, or Mr. Long would like to go first?
You first, please.
Okay.
Yeah.
You can go.
I think Australia actually adapted that software for the contact tracing, the COVID tracing app from Singapore. And essentially, I think they try to allay the fears that of the privacy issues. So they're saying that the data will only be mainly stored on your phone, and then it'll be stored on Amazon servers on the third party, and the Ministry of Health and the government, the Commonwealth government, will have no access to it, and so on. So they try their best to do that. And I think the take-up was really high, right? I think Damon will probably know better than I do, but I think it's like over 2.5 million or 3 million when they launched it. For population.
Yeah, it's up to 4 million, and it's only the first week that it's been released. But yeah, the other thing as well, which is interesting, is they're using non-identifiable Bluetooth, and they're deleting the data for 21 days. So they have actually gone to a lot of effort, because people are now really concerned about privacy. And I think it's become more mainstream than perhaps 10 years ago or pre-blockchain. People would be less concerned about this.
Yeah, the problem I find though is being diabetic, and also I'm using the Weight Watchers scale the Bluetooth software. It interferes with the medical devices that require Bluetooth turn on all the time. In fact, Diabetes Australia had sent out a message to all their lists that if it interferes with the software for monitoring your blood sugar level, then turn it off. So there are some technical issues, not so much blockchain or privacy issue, but more on the technical side. Just one thing to add on in terms of the medical side, and Damien worked on this project too. It's another company I invested in called YPB that's listed on the ASX, on the Australian Stock Exchange, where they are actually trying to use blockchain to basically incentivize technology for basically fighting counterfeit drugs. So, even the tests that you have, as you can see from China, you can actually Google and you can buy it for one of my friends from China is like, would you like to buy some of these tests, $10 a piece? But how effective is it? And is it actually, a real product, or is it a counterfeit? So this company has a technology that they obtained from MIT called Motif Micro, where they basically coat the product with nanoparticles. You take your camera from your camera phone, flash it, it activates the particles, and the camera takes the similar spectral analysis and tell you whether this product is real or not. And what they wanted you to do is actually scan a QR code and send the data back to like Ali Health or whoever the provider of the sale of the product. So, you know, they will give you a token to buy more products from Ali Health, but Ali Health then collect data that it knows that Clarence in Australia has bought this product and it's genuine. So there are some technology being worked on that side. And I don't know if Damien want to add on to that or.
Yeah, or just I suppose on our side as well, the way we're using blockchains, I suppose quite similar in the fact that we're trying to gather health data early on. So we're doing preventative, and I think preventative, coming back to that crypto space, which I know was mentioned before, is if you can incentivize people to be healthy, if you can give them some crypto for being active, and then you also store their data, then it's like, it's a great thing to do, right? And it's going to change people's behavior. So that's how we see blockchain sort of helping in two spaces. One, on the crypto side to be incentivizing people, but two, on the distributed side for storing that data and bringing those two things together works really well. And we were recently just announced with Block One, which is sort of the founder of EOS, or the foundation. And we're being used as a preventative COVID-19 tool, or DAP, that we can sort of help people, because as Clarence has got diabetes, he knows how important it is that when you do have lifestyle diseases like heart disease and things like that, then these viruses that are unknown and novel are going to have a much greater impact on you. So the best thing we can do right now is actually try and defend ourselves by making sure we're as healthy as we can be.
Sure.
Yeah, from Vietnam side, we think about, actually we need to go back to work as soon as possible, but whenever the people want to show that they are positive or negative with COVID, how to know? Not just easy by just checking by your self-search or some of paper you bring together with you. So that's why a lot of solution will come, and blockchain is one of very potential, because they bring the trustable information and trustable, which could not be changed. That's one of the potential of blockchain, how could apply to preventing COVID-19 after the first round. We think that whenever we go out or travel out, we need to bring one small QR code or one small decentralized application by blockchain. Then whenever the government or when any other partner, they want to show how long I make the testing with COVID-19, or 21 days that I already get along, or many other steps that I will pass in the past, and that's stored in the blockchain. That's easy to prove that I am the clean person, or I have just get a test yesterday. Very easy to get in the door. For example, to support for the come back to work.
Sure. Mr. Rajkumar, probably you can give us some of the insights what Sri Lankan government is actually working on some of the new technologies, or probably is if FinTech Association is actually creating some sort of document to help to tackle COVID-19 on the blockchain solutions. Is there anything new initiative which is happening in Sri Lanka? If you can enlighten us. You are on mute. Mr. Rajkumar, you are on mute.
Sorry. No, there is nothing on blockchain related initiative in Sri Lanka. But as like the president of China, he has mentioned that the blockchain should be involved in the many of the things, even for the tackle this maybe the COVID. I think we should not only in Sri Lanka, every other country, maybe should come out on the supply chain side of the medical equipment and the medicines, and every other thing, and also even the donations to the affected people, then there should be some transparency. Even the Red Cross China, they have some time back they face the credibility issue. So what's given to them is not going to the affected people. So that's we should tackle from the blockchain, because here you can't, as Long and Dr. Clarence, the Damien said, we can't manipulate in blockchain. It's not so far. It's very difficult to manipulate or impossible to manipulate. So we need to, then only the donors will trust some system is there and there's some transparency is there, they can't manipulate it. So I think you ask Sri Lanka, because the COVID is not a Sri Lankan phenomenon, because it's international. So we should tackle everywhere in the world. The same sort of system should apply everywhere. But again, there are issues there. Even you mentioned anchor on Africa, because the blockchain is available and everything is there, but still the connectivity, that problem comes. Wherever the 4G is available, then only we can access the blockchain or any other application. So then, it's a long-term issue. There are a lot of things. Say when we say blockchain, the infrastructure and the 4G connectivity and a lot of issues are there. But there are so many factors and issues and everything. So we like to overcome.
If I can add to what Raj was saying, I think definitely Sri Lanka is very early in its journey. I think we have a stringent kind of central bank who till very recently didn't allow KYC over digital. Still, I think till COVID hit, most KYC had to happen and had to happen in person. So we were a bit behind, but I think now the central bank definitely understands the need for technology adoption. I think about a year ago they had done a study on the central bank, kind of taking a cross section of bankers, try to understand, hey, what is should we explore blockchain now or later? And I think they had officially come back a year, maybe 6 months later and said, okay, maybe blockchain, not now, maybe at a later point. But I think therein lies, and for example, in Hatch, what we're trying to do is, we've just started a fintech accelerator. We have about 7 great companies with us, and also we're trying to help the startups, go against the grain. Therein lies an opportunity for startups and new businesses to think about how can they disrupt kind of banks, etc., and create an initial use case, especially with COVID-19 on the blockchain, whether it's be a tracer, whether it be supply chain, whether it be donations, and that's really what we're trying to do is really get it going. And I think there's opportunity now because they're a lot more. They're going to listen a lot more.
Absolutely. Can I add on top of that, Ankur?
Sure.
Yeah. So it was interesting that again, incentivization was brought as a standpoint, and I think we've definitely been, in emphasizing on a lot of work that's been done on the government front, right? But it's very interesting to see that in India, what we've seen is, there are numerous amount of open source projects that have come up, and something that we have supported is around open data of who's affected, where is he affected, who are sort of second or third level people that are in link with the affected ones, right? Obviously the data being the one that's available in open, because otherwise there could be privacy issues, right? So just thinking out loud, I mean, one of the ideas that we were thinking there was whether the government has sort of come out in terms of identifying zones, right? So green, orange, red zones in terms of, the amount of cases that are there in a zone. So, what we're seeing is there's definitely an incentive. If you're in a green zone, you were easily allowed to maneuver between your zone to another green zone, right? so the idea is that if you could incentivize, for example, in one of our clients in Canada was mentioning about how the Canadian government is sort of distributing about 2,000 Canadian dollars per month to incentivize or to basically cover for costs, because the whole economic activity is sort of gone down, right? So that's a direct way to distribute public funds. Could you also entangle that directly through these public distribution funds that are created, right? So, for example, India has, I think, 1,70,000 crore rupees dedicated towards below poverty line folks, right? People who are daily wage workers. How can you, if they're in need of money, directly depositing to their bank accounts that money? If there could be a factor linked to, let's say their tracing app, if you really stayed within, let's say, 100-meter periphery in your locality, you could actually be given, let's say, 100% of the distribution fund. If you did, let's say, about went a couple of times out of that area, get that down to about 80%. Something like, if if the whole community works together towards solving for infections or reducing infections in an area, or even reporting infections, right? You're looking at technology as a solution for everything, but can you incentivize tipping? Can you incentivize anonymous tipping in terms of, if any of these infected patients can be identified early upon by someone who, sort of gets an early hint that this person might be affected, right? So that could be incentivized through these distribution funds as well, and or the apps directly. So that could be one of the ways, just thinking out loud there.
So I think
Great use case, yeah.
I think there's a lot more incentivization which is happening right now globally, where you be at home, you stay at home, don't go out. So definitely you just not only get incentivized, but also you're not affected anybody else. But I think one of the biggest problem when the pandemic happened, because everybody was not ready to it. One thing is, the biggest problem was happened with the PP kits, or it could be the masks, which it used to cost a cent, not costing $1. So the amount of the background work in terms of, okay, the sanitizers are not available, or for the health workers, or the PP kits are not available. Is there any possibility where supply chain can act in terms of specifically for medical kits, so to ensure that the country has the medical kits, or the people who are using the medical sort of kits, it has to be traced, like, okay, how many people are buying it, because a lot of people who are hoarding as well. If anybody would like to give an input on that, like how to work around on the PP kits, or anybody on the supply chain on the medical, it's open question for everybody. If anybody would like to put in.
Damien, you want to go first?
Yeah, this is a slightly different idea, and maybe a little bit too futuristic for everyone, but I definitely think that in the future, we should be able to get access to open source products, where we have really clear catalog of these types of products that we do need, like ventilators and like the masks, etc. So that, here in Australia, we've got all sorts of factories now creating this stuff because supply chain is completely broken. And they did it pretty quickly, but had we had some type of open source, 100% verified on the blockchain, instruction platform, diagrams for creating these products that are vital in these circumstances, then I think people could respond much quicker, especially when we see now through 3D printing that we can actually start to make some of these things, as very small startups, or even personally, you can start to build some of these products. So I think the future is having this open source shared data source of products, physical things, rather than just software that's potentially stored on the blockchain and can make us sort of move a lot quicker.
I just want to say that there's a Malaysian company that's now trying to come to Sri Lanka that helps people trace medical kits within a particular area, but obviously that relies on and it's done on the blockchain, and it relies on people entering that data on top of it. If there's a way to, I don't know, somehow crowdsource that data of where medical kits are available, as you know, Akshay mentioned, to some kind of incentive, it makes it a lot easier. I also just want to throw out a question here in terms of coming from the AI piece. There's been a lot of talk about federated learning, right? And federated learning could be an incentive to help blockchain kind of go forward, especially if the data ownership can be given back to the user, like in Damien's application, where they're incentivized on tokens or some kind of thing to basically allow their data to be shared to a central model, which then obviously looks at a whole bunch of different models and then updates itself without ever having moving that data from the person. Is that something that's been considered and taken forward?
Sure. Akshay?
I think I'm not aware of anything that's been happening in that format, particularly.
Sure.
But technically, it's possible, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, from outside Vietnam Blockchain Corporation, we already released the for supply chain on blockchain. Let's say agridential.vn. That means credential with the agriculture. In the past 3 months, we already support the produce some spray that in Vietnam, no one make sure that they're using the good liquid to erasing the environment with COVID, but we support them to build the traceability for their spray products from the original places, creating the product until delivering and sell to the market. So that's why when the people they purchase that products to support, they are really want to sorry about that. So they are really happy to using our sprayed products because of they very happy with the traceability information that we help them to do, and not just only by the products, but also the equipment. As you all know that Vietnam have some news about creating some equipment, but how you trust that the equipment is good enough or qualified enough, or when you receive that this is the right equipment that you are using. So in this way we apply agridential.vn, that's agriculture, and credential.vn to support them and touching with them to support them to tracking the supply chain of manufacturing, to step by step make everything very clear and transparency. And then whenever the product comes to the end user, they trust that information by blockchain. Yeah.
Sure. Akshay, I have a question for you here. There's a question which came that in India, how to establish a trust through telemedicine and bring consensus from illiterate tribals who lack serious health infrastructure and ensure privacy assured.
Sorry, I'd like to break that question.
Not only in India, I think this happens everywhere. I think it's not only for India. This is actually works for Sri Lanka. It could be Vietnam. It could be any other country. So there are, and I would say it's just not illiterate. I would say educated illiterates.
Pseudo intellects, if you say so, if you may, right? So yeah. So I mean, the question essentially asks, how can you encourage enterprises and government to take part in blockchain solutions? I mean, I think the idea is not that we need to encourage anybody to take part in blockchain solutions. The idea is to encourage them to really, go after higher level vision problems, right? So for example, the government directly has started a hackathon wherein use blockchain, AI, or whatever, solve the problem of infection spreading. And if you have a solution based on blockchain, I guess, present that. So, I mean, I don't know why would you specifically want to promote that, but Ankur, is that the question that you wanted me to answer? Because I was a little lost.
There's another question actually.
Uh-huh.
I think definitely there are governments, there are entities, there are NGOs who are actually doing a lot of work on the COVID.
Absolutely.
So the question was from Hari Reddy.
Uh-huh.
I think that's the third or fourth question, which he mentioned about how to establish trust through telemedicine and bring consensus.
Telemedicine. I'm sorry. I've sort of no idea how to do that.
True. So like I don't think so. Like we can't use any telemedicine onto the blockchain, right?
I mean, is the idea to track medicine? Because I remember the Niti Aayog was working with an Israeli company about a year ago, wherein the idea was to stop, the use of expired medicines. Right? What was happening there was that once the medicines got expired, there were some organizations that were, repackaging it with new expiry dates. Right? So the idea there was to impart. A combination of things wherein if the seal or the packaging gets sort of opened, you could actually have that data mapped onto a central a sort of a repository that says that this kind of medicine is particularly invalid, right? And they had a bunch of things going around. So maybe that the idea there is to digitally map medicine with things. Is that the idea? And trace it, or ensure that it's consumed in the right probably timeline or something like that.
Yeah, that company Clarence spoke about is actually doing that. YPB, the Australian one, so for a big Indonesian firm called Compifar, I think. And so it does both that. It does the expiry of medicine and also the traceability. And that's the beautiful thing of having a record. And simply a scan of a QR code will give you the blockchain full record of that supply chain and the expiry and everything. So I think it's becoming more common, and products, it's getting cheaper as well to do.
Mm-hmm.
So the next question is, I think probably Rajkumar and Jeevan can answer this. How do you encourage enterprises and government to take part in blockchain solutions, given to the close nature of carrying out businesses in countries like Sri Lanka?
Yeah, that's a tough one. Yeah, I'll go first, Mr. Rajkumar. So I think that's a tough one. I think that's why one of the reasons why kind of Hatch exists, right? We try to get the startup on board, and then we work closely with either corporates, government, etc., to help push that. And that's exactly what we're doing in the FinTech Accelerator with the FinTech Association of Sri Lanka is enabling these startups to then get market access just in Sri Lanka and then also globally as well, right? So look, there is no one clear-cut answer, but I think it's we're lucky because the good news, Sharmilan, I guess, is there's a real impetus now by government to use technology to solve problems. And I think if you're kind of seen as solving the problem in the right way, etc., I think your solution will be taken on board. And I think your particular solution is around fundraising, which we'll definitely be keen to work with you and figure out a way forward. So just reach out to me after this.
Sure. I think, Rajkumar, any thoughts? Anything you want to add on?
Yeah, there are a lot of things on blockchain, but but though I am the president of FinTech of Sri Lanka, so I move around recently to East Asia and Southeast Asia a lot. I was in Saigon to meet along, and even in Singapore with various, and Hong Kong. So now even in Middle East, I was a judge for the Seamless Middle East, and but it's postponed. So I'm a judge, and I went through a lot of startups with the blockchain applications. So it is my thought, blockchain application, we can focus solely in Sri Lanka because it should be a consortium of sort of international, even the Hatch Jeevan represent. We should collaborate with a lot of other the similar thing, even in Long should get involved in Vietnam, and Dr. Clarence and Damien from Australia, even India, even Mumbai. I have been recently in Mumbai FinTech, one phase in Mumbai at so there are also a lot of blockchain initiatives. So we all collaborate at least in the Asian level, even not the international level, at the Asian level, and we should come out with some solution, and then only we can cut cost, and then only we can influence the governments. So even in the FinTech Sri Lanka and Hatch, we can't influence so much the Sri Lankan government, though we have a very good rapport with the Central Bank of Sri Lanka. The FinTech Association, because all of the summits the central bank is representing, all the summits in overseas, the central bank represents us. So now the thing is, now if we want to give more push to the government, so then we need an international consortium, and not only the so then only it can take place. So that's and also we'll have to, the infrastructure should be developed everywhere. At least the key players, you see now, you mean the supply chain, okay, at least in the hospitals and the factories and those who are connected with all these the medical supplies, and the hospitals, everywhere should be at least the blockchain should connect this infrastructure. At least we don't need the end users. At least the medical infrastructure, the pharmaceutical companies and all these people, all should be connected with this blockchain, and so initially, and this the World Bank and also the World Health Organization and all the UN, and they all should fund a special project, this particular consortium of this blockchain based initiative. Then only it is we can it's something we can get materialized. Otherwise, we'll all talk, and Sri Lanka alone, India alone, Vietnam alone, that won't work. Should be an international project, some international initiative, blockchain based. It should come at least with the medical sphere. All this connected with the medical sphere. Then only we can tackle this COVID. Even the donations, or even the track, even now they want to use the Bluetooth technology to track the COVID, the infected people. Then the near field shown, like if you are going to some infected person, then that gives somebody's mobile, and that's a lot of technology. So we want all these things. We can think about later how we can put this blockchain into this sort of mechanism. Because why I mentioned blockchain, because it's no centralized, then later on the governments can't utilize this sort of the data later on for any of the other political or the other activities, because we don't want our privacy to be just because the COVID. We don't want to. We can't just sell our privacy. So this blockchain can sort out in many ways.
Sure.
I think Ankur, I would just like to add on top of it, right? Just from a broader perspective, our efforts. So we've done almost about 2 years of work trying to convince.
Actually, I got your perspective. I have the last question here, which is actually going to answer your question.
Okay.
So I know, like we have, we are finishing off with the time as well. There's the last question to everybody, and please give me your answer as compared, like give with your own country where you are, and what do you think, like which can, and you can pick up the things which can actually work for your country as well. Is there any ecosystem centric approach when it comes to the pandemic, where every country can come together, share data, even if you're traveling for future, even if you're traveling, today I'm in India, today I'm traveling to Sri Lanka, or I'm traveling to Vietnam, how a Vietnamese government can check me that, okay, I am a COVID person or not. So to ensure that, that everybody is compliant, towards what they're doing. Is there any ecosystem approach which you think that the blockchain can actually do? That one. And second is how a blockchain can influence the government. It should not be the people. It should not be, I would not say just with some sort of association, but it should work. But the technology should speak by themselves. And it has been speaking out loud already. So what can be done the best? So take your time. You can, I would like to have this answer because that is, I think, very much important for anybody, like why we are doing this. Like we are sitting from multiple other countries and we are all together here just to ensure that we are a part of same ecosystem as in blockchain. We are trying to make lives better for other people and how this technology can evolve. Is there any ecosystem approach? That's something I would like to hear from everyone. Who would like to first?
Happy to sort of think out loud. So I think again goes back to some of the things that have worked. So one, lockdown has worked in some way. So it might be a good idea to think May 2021 might be timeline of that might be a good idea to not let anyone travel at first, right? Let them travel locally between green zones. Think of that happening. Let them travel for essential needs locally. That being the key area where what you see there is that the government or the system there that you impose is sort of the identified individuals that are suffering from any such infection, right, has to be cognizant of the fact that the more they interact with anyone, the more physically, the more the chance of spreading, right? Now when you're looking as an ecosystem, you have to look at there needs to be a barrier to get to any area that's affected severely or even affected minutely, right? So for example, just secluding areas that are probably that have a certain amount of concentration of infections might be a great way to do this, right? When you think about travel between countries, then it becomes about ensuring the travel right from the point wherein the country where it's coming from, there has to be a system wherein at the at the point of exit and at the point of entry to another country, there is a good system which sort of is looking at people who were affected in the past, and sort of a control of they not moving between any such regions, right? And even regions that are like green zone to green zone travel can be something that you can look at. But I guess the idea would be to sort of not allow it unless it's completely essential. And as an ecosystem, probably I don't know how the crowdsourcing thing could work, but I'm just generally thinking out loud that the open data program that one such program that's picked up in India could be extended to saying that let's say these areas in the past, if you compare their digital traces of location, this is an area, and I think I read of something along those lines happening in China, but an area gets logged out that these areas are probably where you can't travel, right? And since platforms like that of Google Maps, etc., are the most scalable option that we have, I think it might be a great option to look at any of the things that you can facilitate these platforms to do or do on top of data that comes from these platforms, right? So open source solution, right? For example, you have these worldometer kind of projects happening wherein you can get as minute data about what's happening where, down to the state level, extending that and sort of contributing to that data in whichever way, in terms of identification of green zones, in terms of identification of people that are affected, right? So just helping that segregation happen can be a good ecosystem way to look at things.
So,
Yeah, no, in Australia, just I don't know if everyone knows this, but in Australia, one of the way we've stopped obviously the travel coming in, but I think a big thing they did was every single person who came to Australia had to go into quarantine directly from the airport to a hotel, and they were paid to stay in that hotel for 2 weeks, and that was the way where they fully sort of cut it off. Now that's obviously not practical everywhere else, but this is something that's actually worked quite well, and they're talking about potentially now having Australia is a semi-green zone, and New Zealand, that maybe they'll be the first area where they sort of start opening that up again. But coming back to the ecosystem, I think it needs to be driven from a globalization perspective. So it needs to be the World Health Organization or something much bigger than a single country that's able to try and, you know, collate this data, and there's a level of trust there that governments are happy, or, you know, the community is happy to share some of that data up to, you know, a larger organization.
And I think just to add to that too, the government themselves, I think, is having a challenge, because we're going to have elections at the end of the year in the state, and obviously you cannot have people congregating together. And it was very controversial when we had council elections here, you know, where people have to go in and do ballot. There's no electronic voting or online voting. So this is where blockchain, I think, will play a huge role. There was I don't know whether you guys heard of voteflux.org, set up in Australia. They basically wanted to really allow democracy to work, where everybody with a mobile phone will run the app, and you actually, it's an issue-based party. So, you know, they will ask somebody to run, but the person really has no power, because the power lies in everybody who is a voter of VoteFlux, so you can choose and vote. And the person in the parliament basically has to, you know, go with the majority of the vote on the app. It's a blockchain tag that they're opening up the platform actually to allow other countries to use it too. So I think that aspect of it is interesting. But I think that the travel side, I mean, you know, it's a bit morbid to think about it, but if you look at all the countries that are suffering from COVID right now, you know, all the countries, the major elderly population. And those countries are actually going to come out stronger, right? Because if you think about it, they have huge liability for Social Security and pension funds and so on. And, you know, essentially the uptake of you know, the industry is actually going to pick up more. You know, so I think the travel side of things, you're right. I mean, you know, it is going to be an issue, you know, for face-to-face contact, but hopefully the technology could pick up some of the slack or basically increases pace of adoption. But yeah, it'd be hard to see. That's why I guess Warren Buffett yesterday said that he sold all his airline shares, right? So that tells you something.
Interesting use case, Ankur. But it seems like, you know, just thinking about it just now, and understanding, like, we have taken for granted a lot of things, right? Movement, free movement in systems, etc. And then now you're talking about movement across borders. I think there has to be some kind of incentive around, you know, money around certification. Like, for example, if I'm to go to Australia, if I'm to go to India, there has to be some kind of money that I pay for certification to go to India, to say that I'm healthy currently. And also, I think it could be done through insurance or healthcare systems, where if I'm going from Sri Lanka to India, I'm now transferred to the Indian healthcare system, and I'm going to be taken care by the Indian healthcare system while I'm there, and I should be okay to pay for it because it's in my best incentive to do that. So I think you can definitely model a business case around this, but there's a lot of players, right? So the healthcare system in Sri Lanka, the government, and then the government in India, and the healthcare system in India. So we need to somehow connect those dots, but I think the incentive and mechanism is very clear, and that kind of digital certificate using blockchain can easily be done. It's not the technology; it's really the how do you put it in a business case?
Yeah, Jeevan, I think the use of blockchain seems apt here, because one, you know, for travel,
Decentralized, right?
Yeah, exactly. So one, decentralized. Two, you know, you can see why the need of you know, authentic data, right, coming from the right parties, because this could be, so, you know, this is directly tied to economic activity, right? So if you're traveling between countries, you know, that directly means business, and if you're able to do that when the rest of the world can't, there can be, you know, early opportunities that can come your way. So the need for blockchain to make this as efficient as possible is clearly there. and the certificates have to be not something that people can give on whims and fancies, and hence the need for a proper system to incentivize the right kind of dispersal of these certificates.
Yeah, it's a time-bound certificate to go to India and come back within X number of days, right? Or go to Australia and come back between X number of days, which could be driven by insurance and health. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good revenue stream for the governments as well.
Yeah, I think that for the ecosystem, actually we already had the platform for last 3 years, and now we apply for the supply chain and COVID-19 test certification already on the MVP phase. But actually, as you said, it's not easy to apply with the government or the hospitality, not easy to accept them. So with this, the idea from Rakuma or from one of the gentlemen here, I think we could build the ecosystem and then we test our idea together. For example, we will send you our platform for using. Then if we could connect together by, for example, we have 9 people here, we create 9 nodes, and then we link together by blockchain for enterprises first, then look at the quality or look at the result of what we do in each of our country, and then we call for our group. For example, I also have the mission to create the startup blockchain communication in Vietnam in 2020. That's the 1.5 year project, and start from this June. That I could build in Vietnam, but not easy to come to the other country, as we are the ecosystem and network linked together, and could share our results. And at that time, the other people will see that it's easy to cross-chain the information from Vietnam to India or to Australia to US or many other countries by blockchain. So they will recognize the value of the blockchain to apply for this COVID-19 presenting.
Sure, I think it's a great discussions what we all had. So yeah, Mr. Rajkumar, you want to add something?
Yeah, I think Long has a lot of ideas because I have been to SciCon last year, in October, and I share with a lot of ideas with Long at Parket SciCon. So, and also now the Jeevan, he's coming out with some accelerator, the first fintech accelerator in Sri Lanka. I think we should initiate something on blockchain, also part of, and also tackle this medical supply chain into this. We can't just wait for the government, because here there is no government at all at the moment. Only the president is running the show. So what we should do is, we private sector, we should start the initiative, and we should collaborate with like Long, and he has a lot of ideas, and they are doing a lot of things in Vietnam, because Vietnam is moving fast. And also we have a lot of others in the crypto. The blockchain is applied in the some sort of supply chain management, other areas, and also in the crypto world. And the crypto, I don't want to discuss because I have a lot of crazy ideas, but I don't know whether that's applicable at this moment and at that particular time. Because so now we like the medical supply chain is the important at the moment. So I think Jeevan, we should start with the Long and some others, only particular thing as a priority on the medical supply in Sri Lanka, and also it could be applied in Mumbai, in India, because in India they are very knowledgeable on the blockchain. They have a lot of ideas.
Yeah, Mr. Rajkumar, I completely agree with you, and I think we also shouldn't reinvent the wheel. So I think countries like Australia and stuff and Vietnam who are ahead of us, there's a lot to learn and a lot to collaborate with. So if we can collaborate with you guys, I think that would be great. And India as well, I'm sure, has a lot of great expertise. So let's all work together and try and come up with something that's good. And I think I can see use cases in medical that you might be interested in Sri Lanka. There might be use cases, Akshay, that you have possible incentive systems that you can bring in as well, and from Vietnam as well. So I think there's just a whole lot of opportunity here, and I think we just need to decide what are we going to go after at this moment in time. So Thank you.
Yeah,
So-
thank you for a great idea. And we have some demonstration, not more than 10, but around 9 application based on the blockchain right now in hand that we could show you that whatever we could develop more, collaborate together.
Thank you.
So,
Yeah, that goes
I
the
think-
same for us. Our platform's already live in Vietnam. So Dr. Long, make sure you try it out later tomorrow. But yeah, we're also looking at going global straight away. So it'd be awesome to work with all of you guys in some format.
Yeah.
Sure, thank you. Yeah.
I guess then the next thing after this panel is to touch base over a group separately, create opportunities for making wins for everyone.
Absolutely. Yeah, let's do that.
I was just thinking about, the vaccination, the WHO form that, for yellow fever and stuff like that. Because when I came back from Africa, back to Australia during the Commonwealth Games, they didn't allow me to use my e-passport because you need to show them that you have your yellow fever vaccination. While in Kenya, you could basically just buy it for $10 without having the vaccination, right? So this is the problem, right? You could have the best blockchain technology to certify it, but you actually haven't got the shot. In my case, I actually told the border security in Australia, I said, aren't I yellow enough? Any yellow, I'll be dead. And I found that the border security people don't have sense of humor. So yeah, don't do that. All right, guys.
I just want to say that the reason we're doing this is we're going to have a hackathon in Sri Lanka in 2 weeks, and we really want collaboration, co-creation, etc. going on. So we'll definitely invite you to that panel once we have the startups come up with their ideas, and looking forward to that as well. Thank you.
So
All right.
thank you for everybody for spending time. Okay, stay home, stay safe.